is a true horrifying story. This story took place in Kuwait in the year 1997. Weddings back then were very traditional in Arabic countries, and they still are. A wedding bridal party would take place in the bride's house before the actual wedding day. In these bridal parties, usually a female band group are hired to play music. You know, ones that play these ancient Arabic music, the ones with the Arabic drums. A very famous female band group were very known back in the 90s named Tagagat Nura. They got a call one night for an inquiry to play at a bride's party. They negotiated the price, prepared for the party, and then got the address. On the bridal's day, this is Nura by the way, her and her team finally reached the house. The house looked very nice. It had many lights outside. There were children playing, women all dressed up. They were greeted by the bride's mother. They were taken to the guest room so they can prepare before playing the music. At 9 p.m., Noura and her team start playing, and the ladies go wild and start dancing. They did not stop playing the music till 12 midnight. They asked the bride's mom for a short break, but she refused. She told them that she would pay them extra if they continued playing the music. So they keep playing for an extra 2 hours, and they get shocked at how these ladies don't get tired from all this dancing. At one point, the electricity goes completely off, and then they were ordered to continue playing so they can send someone to check the electricity. So Noura and her team continue playing in pitch darkness. The way these women were dancing was kind of off and strange. It was kind of scary in a way that this band has never seen before. So this is what happened next. One of the artists fainted on stage. They immediately stopped playing, picked her up and took her to the guest room. They tried to wake her up, and then she did and started crying from fear. They asked her what was going on, what happened, and she responded by saying one of the women that were dancing had legs that did not look like human legs. They looked like goat legs. And Noura immediately knew what kind of beings were inside this house. They slowly snuck outside through the window and started running for their lives. While they were running through the neighborhood, there was a random guy that was walking. He stopped them and yelled at why they were shouting in the middle of the night. They said that they were playing music for that big house and an incident has happened. And the man asked, "What house?" The ladies pointed at the house again. The man looked at the house and told them that this house has been abandoned and left empty for 10 years and that no one lives in that house anymore. They peeked at the house again, and there were no cars, no people, no lights, no children. It was a plain, abandoned, empty house. They thought to themselves that, were they all dreaming the same thing? Was it all just an imagination that they all imagined at the same time? These were jinns that they were playing for. This is in fact a true story. And this is the real picture that was taken inside that wedding. This is a true horrifying story, part 2. In 2012, a video has been released online by a security manager at a hotel. The video took place in a Wingate hotel in the state of Illinois on September 14th, 2003. Other than all the ghost caught on camera videos that were published on YouTube, this is by far one of the real ones. According to him, people began calling in noise complaints to the front desk, with reports of loud screaming coming from the second floor, particularly room 209. So John, one of the security officers, goes there to check that room. And while he was going, there were 2 other people from his team on standby. He reaches close to that room and immediately hears screaming coming from inside. As his team tells him that there was nobody that checked in that room on that day.
It's room 209. Amy says nobody's checked into that room, and there's reports of screaming coming from that room. Amy, he's on his way down there right now. What's going on, John? There's no one checked into that room. There should be nobody in there. Wait 1 second, John. Amy, are you there? John, just wait. We're going to get a hold of the police. So, I would wait for the police, John. Amy, John's going to enter the room real quick just to check, make sure, see what's going on. Wait one. John? John, are you there?
Now we all noticed that the lights outside started to flicker, but did you notice the figure that left that room? This is a true horrifying story, part 3. This story took place in Dubai in the year 2007. The story I'm about to tell you was told to me by the actual characters that went through this terror, and it was never shared online nor disclosed to the public until now. An Emirati married couple with 3 kids lived in a villa in Jumeirah 1. Their youngest son, Ahmed, at the time was 8 years old. Ahmed would tend to have horrible dreams every night, and he would complain about this to his family. But it seemed kind of okay at the time because children in his age group tend to have nightmares. But Ahmed's dreams started to pick up their intensity a few weeks later. They knew it got more serious when Ahmed started having sleep paralysis. He would feel like there is something with him in his room. Later on one of these nights, the bad dreams he had were no longer dreams. Something would wake Ahmed up during the night. He would have no control over his body as he gets out of bed. He would walk out of his room, go downstairs to the kitchen, and go close to the back door. He would open the door. As his foot leaves the door, he would gain control over his body again. He was certain that it was not him sleepwalking. He was conscious throughout the whole trip. After gaining control over his body, he would run to his mom crying from fear. She slept next to him later that night till the next morning. The next day, he would sleep, wake up, and the same exact routine would repeat. Goes downstairs, goes to the kitchen. As he steps outside, he gains control over his body. This would happen to Ahmed almost every night for 2 years straight, to the point where Ahmed got used to it. Though that's not the freaky part about this whole story. After Ahmed's reoccurring event, Ahmed's mom decided to lock the kitchen door and hide the keys. She wanted to test this out on one of these nights. So later that night, Ahmed sleeps, wakes up, goes downstairs to the kitchen, grabs the doorknob, and there you have it. The door is unlocked. The door locking process would take place every single night, but the door will always somehow be unlocked, like something is trying to get Ahmed out of that house at night. Eventually, Ahmed turned 10 or 11 years old a few years later, and thankfully, these paranormal night walks have stopped. He is 23 years old today, and nothing has happened after that last time 12 years ago. But the story still haunts him till this day, wondering why and who was trying to get Ahmed out of that house. This is a true horrifying story, part 4. There are a couple of paranormal spots in the UAE that are known to be haunted, such as the Pan Emirates Tunnel, the Khail Gate building, the ghost town in Ras Al Khaimah, the Jumeirah house. But by far, the most haunted place, the most place that made visitors' spines shiver, with the most recorded paranormal incidents, is Al Qasimi Palace in Ras Al Khaimah. This palace was built by the late Sheikh Abdulaziz bin Hamid Al Qasimi in 1985. Since the late 1980s, this palace was already abandoned with all the furnitures inside. A man was called to come into this palace 20 years ago. He was a little bit worried because he knows about the supernatural spirits that roam its halls. He had a maintenance work order to work in one of the rooms in that palace since the palace was sold to someone else. On the first day of his jobs, things such as his tools would be found misplaced. He would take something out of his bag and then leave, come back, and that tool is back in the bag again. These few things were only confusing him. He did not think otherwise. A few days later, these chandeliers would rock right and left while there was no wind in that room. In some occasions, this man would hear children's voices inside the palace and ignore it for hours. Through reflections, he would see glimpses of children staring at him for a split second. He was reporting these cases to the people in charge, but no actions were taken. A week later, this man would see furniture being tossed around like toys in front of his eyes. Entities that have intense amount of power that can manage to toss couches and tables across a whole room. He felt completely uninvited and decided to leave that work order. On that same year, holy men would come, read prayers, and cleanse the palace. No serious reports were made later on. But till this very day, the voices are still heard by some visitors that these beings don't like. And these same visitors would witness what seems to be like children would stare at them from the windows as they walk out. This is a true horrifying story, part 5. This story took place in Saudi Arabia in 2016. There are many known religious scholars and Islamic sheikhs in Arabic countries, including the UAE. Each of them are experienced in different things. Some are known to be muftis, some are known to be dream interpreters, and some are known to be raqis. Raqis are Islamic scholars that do ruqya shar'iyya on people. They're also called exorcists. They would cleanse bodies from demons and black magic. One very known Muslim exorcist in Saudi Arabia, I would feel more comfortable not saying his name. He used to cleanse almost 10 people every day for the past 15 years of his life, and he would not take a single penny for the service that he provides. He used to do this only for God and to help the ones in need for cleansing. One day, a possessed Arabic man that has been suffering for years had his appointment with that sheikh that day. He had many bruises and scratches all over his body. The man sits down and the sheikh introduces the process of what's going to happen and tells the man not to worry. The sheikh had 4 other men with him in case things go bad. The sheikh starts to recite a few verses from the Quran to test the man's body language. His fingers started to twitch as his head tilted down. He slowly starts to recite the ruqya, and the man's fingers all start rotating back abnormally. 20 minutes later, the sheikh stops for a moment. The man stares at him with a smile and asks him a question in Russian. Now the whole session is recorded, and the cleansing procedure took hours with a lot of shouting in Russian from that man. The man swore that he does not speak a single word in Russian after he woke up. He left, and he had to come back the following day for his next session. The sheikh was notified the next day that this man has passed away from a stroke. On that same afternoon, they proceeded with the burial and the funeral for that man. A week later, the sheikh took the tapes to translate what has been said in Russian. This was the translation. I am in love with this man. I will take his life. I will take his life. This is a true horrifying story, part 6. This story took place in Dubai in the year 1996, and the real characters of this story are Emirati women. Back in the day, and actually till this day, there's a game called a Ouija board. In Arabic, it's also known as Ouija. It involves a group of players playing in the dark, burn sage, light up candles. They place their fingers on a peck and then ask Ouija questions. Now there are many videos on YouTube of people playing this game, and every time people play it, they freak out or things go wrong. You would ask a yes or no question, or a question that involves one answer, with everybody's fingers placed on the peck, and the peck will move on its own. When you buy the board, it comes with some sort of ritual that the players must read. I do not advise anyone under any circumstance to play this game. The Ouija board is not a joke. You can do your own research. A group of girls in 1996 decided to play this game. One of their friends brought back the board from the UK after her recent trip. They laughed about this game and doubted that it works. They meet up on a Friday night in one of the girls' houses, light up the candles, and start reading the rituals. They close the light, place their fingers on the peck, and start asking a few questions. But the peck doesn't move. They keep trying for another 5 minutes, and still nothing happened. Until one of the girls asked, "What can we do to make this game work?" The peck slowly moves to the letter Q, U, I, E, and then T, which spells the word quiet. They knew that they had to be quiet in order to play this game. They all freaked out when the peck started moving. One of the girls decided to leave, but her friends forced her to stay and play. They started asking yes and no questions to verify this entity's knowledge. Questions such as, "Are you real? Yes. Do you live with us on Earth? No." Questions kept going and the peck was moving all around. Until one of the girls asked, "Are you going to hurt us?" Yes. The same girl asked, "Are you alone?" No. Because it seemed that that first entity was friendly, but the one that is with that entity is not friendly. Now the rules of the game is do not move your fingers from this piece. 2 girls freaked out after that answer and took their hands off. The candles blew out. All of the girls ran out the room and went home terrified, except the last girl that left that room, who later then threw the board game in the trash before completing it. Her personality changed after that day. She's always quiet, barely laughs or smiles. She was not social anymore, her facial features started to change, and she cut herself off of her social circle. The girl is still around till this day, but no one knows why and who made her permanently change like that. This is a true horrifying story, part 7. This story took place in the UAE in the year 2021. Yes, this year. Hamza, a 19-year-old young man, was out camping and barbecuing with his friends in one of the deserts in the country. After finishing all their activities, they were enjoying the cool breeze in the dark, and then they sat around the fire. It was story time. They told each other stories of paranormal activities they have experienced. The stories kept coming till midnight, when the boys realized it was late and time to go home. Hamza was the only one with a driver's license back in early 2021, so he had to drop his friends back home. Some of them lived in Merdif, so they asked Hamza to stop at a house over there that is abandoned. Some rumors in the neighborhood move around and say that this house is haunted. The house looked very creepy and old. It was half broken and had a bush that was growing on the top. Nobody was spooked out. Hamza and one of his friends go inside and start knocking on the gate. They wouldn't stop knocking and laughing about the whole thing, until one of the friends told them that it was not a good idea to disturb the demons, but they thought it was funny. They hopped back in the car, driving down the same street, laughing off what they did to that house. Hamza had to drive another block away to drop one of his friends that lived in Merdif as well. The street they were driving in was so dark, so Hamza tells the boys he's gonna switch the beam on. And one of the boys in the back says, "Imagine a ghost pops up as soon as you open the light." Hamza giggled and switches the beam on. And Hamza froze. He sees an old lady in front of the car with thick skin, pale as paper, wearing a full white dress and had very long hair. A real jinn stares at Hamza and Hamza's friend, the one that was back with him at the house knocking on the door. Hamza and his friend started breathing heavy. Their legs started shaking from intense fear. They were locked tight in their seats and no words were able to come out of their mouths. The creepiest part is the other friends weren't able to see anything. They were confused to what their friends were seeing. He turns the blinkers on and the lady vanishes out of nowhere. On that same night, Hamza drops everyone home and goes straight to bed. In his sleep on that same night, Hamza had nightmares of that same figure killing him. He woke up from fear and told his friend the nightmare story. The same friend with Hamza that saw that jinn had the exact same dream of that lady in white killing him. And since that day, they never messed around with any house that was abandoned. This is how jinns warn you. A'udhu billah. Gratefully, that was just a pinch from the jinns. They never haunted them again. This is a true horrifying story, part 8. This story took place with a Muslim man in the early 2000s in a small village in Sudan. To Muslim and non-Muslim viewers, let me explain what a ghost is in our religion. In Islam, we do not believe in people's spirits. The beings that haunt us are not bad souls of dead people. We refer to them as jinns. They are paranormal beings that live among us, but on a different plane, if that makes sense. They live in their own world. They get married to one another, males and females. There are old jinns, there are younger ones, there are good ones and also bad ones. The bad ones, who are the disbelievers, are known as the shaitans, in English, Satans. There are Muslim jinns, there are Christian jinns, there are weak ones, strong ones, dumb ones, and very smart ones. There are different types of jinns, such as the afrit, the khubth and the khaba'ith, the ghols, and the shapeshifters. The shapeshifting jinns have the ability to completely shapeshift into human form or specific animals, such as black cats, lizards, spiders, and more. In their world, they can see us, but we cannot see them. A Sudanese man that lives and studies in Europe visited his family in one of the Islamic occasions in Sudan. He's not really a big fan of the area he lives in, knowing that a few spots there are haunted by jinns. He has bad childhood memories of seeing figures, listening to kids playing late at night, and hearing strange animal noises. For the first time ever, this man might have seen a jinn closest to its real form, but not quite. The only way you can see a jinn is if the jinn shapeshifted. And sometimes the shapeshifting process is not quite accurate. The animal or the human form might have some faults. On one of the late nights, this man was outside smoking a cigarette, and he started hearing stray dogs barking. Minute by minute, the barks would get more aggressive. He sees a strange looking black animal that looks like a dog. He notices the stray dogs around this animal are barking at this dog specifically. The animal was moving towards him slowly, staring deep into his eyes. The man froze from fear and drops his cigarette. As the animal kept getting closer, it started looking different step by step. Its size started increasing, its eyes began diluting, and its arms was getting bulkier. He wanted to say the prayers to make it go away, but something was stopping him. This animal kept coming a few feet closer, and then the man saw it clearly. It had arms that looked like human arms, a face of a goat, and a body of a bulky dog. The animal stood up on both legs, and the man shouted the prayer. It drops down and shapeshifts into a small black cat and sprints away. Do jinns actually look like that, the way this author described? Or was that a shapeshifting fault? This is a true horrifying story, part 9. This story took place in the International Indian School in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, in the year 2003. Asim, a 16-year-old Indian student in that school, born and raised in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. On a normal school day, Asim was walking back home alone from school as he lived 5 minutes away. He would walk alone almost every day. It was a hot, sunny day and the roads were empty. Asim suddenly realized that there is someone or something walking right behind him. He sees a very tall woman, about 7 feet tall, covered in black and wearing the niqab, very common attire that women wear in Saudi Arabia. He just took a glimpse and then turned back very quickly without having any other thoughts about that woman, and she was about 150 meters away. As he walked, he asked himself, why was that woman very tall and walked boldly like a wrestler? In that split second, Asim decided to turn his head for one last quick look, and the woman was right behind him. She was able to cover 150 meters in a few seconds. This boy's heart drops. He started walking faster without looking back, as his house was only 50 feet away. He did not want to run because she would know that he's scared. He reaches outside, grabs the handle of the gate, feels safer, and immediately turns around. And no one was there. The entire area was completely deserted, like no one has ever been there before. Now that there are no connecting lanes around the building that Asim lives in, the woman had nowhere to turn. But where is she? It terrified him that she vanished out of nowhere, given the fact that she also followed him 100 meters plus in a few seconds. He just froze and stood there in shock for a whole minute after what just happened. He goes through the gate, turns his head one last time, and there she is, 20 feet away from the gate, staring through his soul with a smile. He was able to tell that she was smiling from the lifted eyelids from the rear ends. As he froze in his spot, staring at this thing, it removes its veil slowly, and the boy sees not a man, not a woman, but a beast-like face, staring at Asim through the gate. After this incident, Asim never walked to school alone for weeks. Until this very day, Asim being in his 30s right now, not knowing what the hell that thing was, and why were the roads completely empty during the time span of this incident. This is a true horrifying story, part 10. This story took place in the year 2019 in Al Ain City, the United Arab Emirates. Mira, a 17-year-old Emirati girl, back then had a 14-year-old sister and a 20-year-old brother that was a police cadet in training. On one evening, Mira's mom was upset with something she did, so she grounded both her and her sister. She took away all their electronic devices, phones, iPads, headphones. On that specific day, her elder brother was reserved back in the training camp, and her father was in Abu Dhabi for work. He only comes back on weekends. So no one was home but Mira, her sister, their mom, and younger siblings. At midnight, the girls decided to go to sleep, so they switched the lights off. As Mira's eyes started dozing off, her younger sister jumped on her bed, frightening Mira, and woke her up. "What's wrong?" Mira asked her sister. As she was crying, she responded by saying, "Something moved my bed." Shivers went down Mira's spine as she heard her sister say that. She stood up and opened the lights. Nothing was in the room. A few minutes later, they hear someone whistling outside their room door. That same person whistling outside the door goes inside the brother's room and slams the door shut. Now they can't see who it is. They can only hear what's going outside in the hallway. They looked at each other scared and confused as their elder brother was not home. A moment later, the same door outside opens and the whistling continues. It sounded very familiar to these girls, but they were certain that their brother is not home, so they started panicking. They had no phones, no iPads to call for help. They're grounded, remember? The back and forth steps of that person outside the room kept going for a solid 1 hour, and the whistling would continue. Doors outside the hallway would open and close. Mira remembered that she had an old laptop in her room. She was able to get a hold of one of her friends from school, and she made her call her mom. Her mom eventually showed up, and she found no one inside the house. After that night, they slept in their mom's room for weeks. Until this very day, they still live in that same house. And on some occasions, a few paranormal events would still happen in their home. This is a true horrifying story, part 11. This story took place in Qatar in the year 2012. Umar, a 6-year-old boy back in 2012, had 2 sisters, ages 15 and 16. Back in the day, they used to play a very common game that we all played in the Middle East called Kook and Kook Dhalam, which is hide and seek, and Kook Dhalam is hide and seek in the dark. And usually kids tend to play this game when there are many cousins over during a family gathering. After a night of a big family gathering that happened in Umar's house, the cousins decided to sleep over. They switched the lights off at 12:45 midnight and they decided to play hide and seek in the dark. They had fun playing the first and second rounds. The third round, not really. During the third round, one of Umar's sisters told everyone that the floor was kinda cold. It was a little colder than usual. They thought the AC was on, so they didn't really care and continued playing. While the sisters were in the dark, barely seeing anything, trying to catch everyone that's hiding, they hear a knocking noise under one of the tables. They started laughing, thinking someone was providing them hints. As they approached the table with full excitement of catching someone, something just didn't feel very right. Whoever was under the table had eyes that were shining. But again, eyes do reflect from a small amount of light. As they crouched down and crawled to the table, they started having second thoughts, so they decided to pull out the flashlight. So they flashed whoever's face this was, and they saw something that made their spines freeze from fear. They saw a foot that was very decayed and had scars all over it. It looked like someone was dead under the table. That was no human being. That was a jinn. They jumped from fear and quickly opened the lights, but to find nothing under that table. They quickly ran downstairs to relieve their fear with their parents. And ever since, these 2 sisters, today being 24, 25 years old, never stepped inside nor slept in a dark room. I had shivers reading this story when it was submitted, because I faced almost a similar occurrence when I played with my cousins hide and seek in the dark back in 2010. This is a true horrifying story, part 12. This story took place in Oman back in 2012. Alejandro, a high school student that lived with both his parents and 2 siblings. They all moved to a big beautiful villa that was listed for sale. Throughout their stay within the first month, everybody in the house experienced strange activities. The maid in the house would complain about the dining table and chairs being rearranged every morning. His brother would complain about seeing figures moving up and down on the staircase. His father would feel a woman's presence in his room while he sleeps, and his sister would hear dog noises coming from her bathroom. By far, the most horrible jinn incidents one can imagine would take place in that house. But Alejandro still hasn't seen or felt anything. One night, Alejandro was on his bed finishing an assignment for school. He hears a woman crying in the house. He goes outside quick to check up on his mom and sister, but they were both asleep. He goes back to his room and he sees steam coming through the edges of his bathroom door. It seemed as if someone was inside taking a hot shower. He opens the door to clear out the vapor. He ignores what he sees and he ignores what he heard and goes to sleep. Something awakens him during his sleep. Alejandro feels something or someone's breath on the side of his face. He wasn't able to open his eyes from how frightened he was. He sinks deeper and deeper into his sheets while there's someone right there, breathing right next to his face. He got out of bed screaming, waking everybody up. Everyone rushes to his room and find no one there. A few weeks later, after this incident, Alejandro's family has a small Shih Tzu. This Shih Tzu dog has given birth to 7 puppies. They woke up one morning seeing all 7 pups placed in a bucket with a lid on top suffocating them all. Something in that house tried to kill all of their pets. On that same week, this family found out that the previous owner of this house was a Omani woman that was abnormal. She had psychological issues that made her crazy, and eventually her inner demons made her commit suicide inside that same house. This is a true horrifying story, part 13. In part 11, I spoke about a story that happened in Qatar with a group of cousins that were playing hide and seek in the dark. And then I explained about how I myself have experienced the same thing when I played that game. This story took place back in 2010 in my house when I was 12 years old. As some of you may know, I'm from Dubai. I'm a Muslim. We pray in this house. We've never seen anything nor heard anything. This story happened around March in 2010. The weather was nice outside. We had a big family gathering outdoors with a buffet catering setup. When we were kids, I was only tight with a few cousins, 2 girl cousins and 4 guy cousins. The rest of the cousins were old at the time. We used to play a bunch of different games every time a family gathering is held. Hide and seek, tag and run, board games. My personal favorite was hide and seek in the dark. It was just unique in its own way. You can get very creative with the spots that you hide in. It was already late at night. Most of the guests were gone and the house was empty inside. So I gathered 3 of my cousins and my baby sister, and we played around in the guest's room. It didn't even take a few rounds. Things went wrong right from the very start. I was the one seeking because I lost the shuffle. I was counting outside the room and the girls were inside hiding. I shouted outside, "I'm coming in," as I was opening the door. So I started looking around. I found everyone except one of my cousins. She's still in there hiding. She was 11 at the time. So I go outside, trying to get my sister to spill the beans about where she's hiding. Yeah, I was cheating. And all of a sudden, we all hear our cousin inside giggling, saying, "Ibrahim, stop." We all sunk into the floor as she said that, knowing that there's no one in the room. She's alone inside in pitch darkness. Something was physical with her inside the room. And she thought it was me. She can't even see what it is. My heart dropped. I didn't even want to open the door to see who it was. We all kicked the door open, turned the lights on. What the heck is going on? She stares at us underneath the dressing table with her eyes wide open. "Was there no one in here?" she asked us. No, there wasn't. We run to our moms, bro. We tell them everything, and you know how parents are. They just don't believe their kids. Our moms didn't believe us. Parents, consider the things your kids tell you. Demons are dangerous. Jinns are life-threatening. And to wake you more, jinns usually go after the younger ones. Unfortunately, kids are the ones that sense them the most. This is a true horrifying story, part 14. This story was submitted by Milton, a 23-year-old pilot that is based in the UAE working for an airline company. And this story took place in Napoli, Italy in the year 2021. Now before I jump into his story, I do need to say this. I've personally heard so many stories from friends that are cabin crew staff and pilots. Out of the hundreds of hotels they stayed in internationally, they all witnessed several hotels that were haunted, and the stories I've heard were very disturbing. Milton had a layover flight from Dubai to Napoli. They landed and checked in the hotel that was assigned by the airline. The hotel was very old. Every step on the old wooden floors was squeaking, and the place just smelled musty. Milton gets the keys to his room, and inside his room he noticed a door that connects him to the room right next to his. Later that night, around 10 or 11 p.m. when Milton was ready to go to bed, he hears knocking noises from the room next door, the one he's connected to. He ignores the noises, thinking they're probably drunk guests staying in there. He ignored the noises for a few hours, and then he gave up. He called the hotel desk complaining about this noise, and they responded by saying, "Sir, you're the only guest staying on that floor." His head rushes with adrenaline as he slowly stares at the connected room door. Knock, knock, knock. He hangs up the phone as he reads his prayers. These noises stop. He also noticed a painting in his room that had 4 women wearing white dresses. It didn't really concern him, so he just goes to sleep. He wakes up the next morning for breakfast. He showers and gets ready, and he comes close to the painting, out of curiosity. And he sees only 2 women wearing white dresses. He quickly tells himself, I was either too tired, or there's something in here messing with my head. So he goes downstairs, has breakfast, and tells the other crew about the story that happened last night. They laugh it off, and he goes back up to his room. And of course, there's only 1 woman in the painting. This is a true horrifying story, part 15. In part 5, I explained in better detail about the jinns, the names and the types of jinns, how they live in their own world. I really recommend watching part 5. The story I'm about to tell you involves a possessed Muslim woman, and she went through an exorcism with Sheikh Abdul Rauf bin Halima. The jinn that possessed this Muslim woman goes by the name Zuzula. The whole clip is posted on YouTube, by the way. The Sheikh started to recite the Quran to make this jinn speak. He wanted answers about how they work. Why are they doing this to humans? And what are their big plots? He would ask the jinn a question, and the jinn would refuse to answer, so he would recite more from the Quran to torture and make this jinn speak. Until this whole thing was a full-on conversation. The jinn Zuzula exposed Iblis and how he works with known people, and how humans sacrifice a baby's life to have direct contact with Iblis. This jinn has said so many stuff that a lot of us humans did not know about in regards to their world. Zuzula asked the Sheikh a question that really caught his attention. She asked him, "Have you heard of the Illuminati?" He said yes, but please tell me more, Zuzula. She said how Iblis, their father, was awaiting his greatest son to arrive. This is the real recording of that specific topic. You can later watch the rest of the video on YouTube.
Son fils le plus grand viendra? Oui. Tu parles de qui? Des jeunes. Oui. Donc les Illuminati préparent des jeunes. Oui. Ah. Et les Illuminati ont des pactes avec Iblis?
Bien sûr, du plus bas degré jusqu'au plus haut.
This is a true horrifying story, part 16. This story took place in Chicago, United States in the year 2017. Before I jump on to the story, I would like to apologize for not posting recently. I was and still am very sick. I'd really appreciate your support. And I did prepare a lot of good content that will be posted as soon as I feel better. Laith, a 23-year-old back in the time, was born and raised in Chicago, Illinois. Laith was staying at his parents' home at the time. The basement was his gaming spot. On one of the nights, he was downstairs in the basement gaming. As Laith was downstairs playing video games at 2 a.m., he felt a very rough, burning feeling on his back. The burning sensation kicked in harder until it got extremely painful. So Laith yelled for help, not knowing what was on his back. His parents woke up and ran downstairs to the basement, and they found a huge scratch on their son's back. After a few minutes, the scratch surprisingly started to fade away and heal. An hour later, Laith went upstairs to brush his teeth and get ready for bed. As he was washing his face, he noticed something through the mirror. He noticed a black figure standing across the toilet, staring at him. He thought it was his little brother messing around. He rubbed the water off his face, but the figure was still there, and it didn't move. Laith decided to chase it very quickly, but that figure completely vanished. After this thing vanished, Laith started yelling so loud, knowing that this was the thing that scratched his back. Laith was never afraid of jinns after that day, knowing that these jinns physically put their hands on him. Laith described it as nothing scary. It was as tall as a young boy, and the face was just not visible. Would you chase after a jinn if it hurt you? This is a true horrifying story, part 17. I got good news and I got bad news. The bad news is this may be the final part of this series. The good news is I might be bringing back true dark web stories very soon. So stay tuned and blow this video up to see how well this series does. Henry, a 15-year-old boy from metropolitan Chicago back in the year 1976. Henry was invited to one of his friend's younger brother's birthday party. The boy turned 7 at the time, so a nice setup was made for the birthday boy. One of the events in that birthday party was having a clown performance. Henry never liked clowns, but surprisingly, Pogo the clown was up next at 12 p.m. The clown was staring at Henry awkwardly while he was performing. And even after the performance, Henry would complain to his friend about how he's creeped out about this clown. Later that evening, the clown approached Henry while he was sitting alone eating the rest of the cake. "Hello, Henry. I'm not scary without the makeup. Believe me, I'm a nice guy," said the clown, and Henry awkwardly laughed. "Do you want to make a quick buck sometime? I could use some woodwork help at my house, and I'll pay you for it, the clown said to Henry, and Henry respectfully rejected that offer and walked away. A few years go by, and Henry never knew who that person he spoke to was. That clown was John Wayne Gacy. Every killer clown movie you have watched was inspired by this serial killer. He raped and murdered 33 young boys in the late 70s. He used to lure boys by dressing up as a clown and attending birthday parties. And 29 out of these 33 victims were buried inside his house that whole time. And Henry, he was one agreement away from becoming the next victim. Fortunately, John Wayne Gacy was executed by lethal injection in the year 1994. How do you feel about clowns? We're back on track. This is a true horrifying story, part 18. This story took place in Sharjah, UAE in the year 2011. For those who don't know what black magic is pretty much witchcraft and a process used to summon demons and then come to an agreement to harm a certain individual. Majid, an 18-year-old back then, lived in his parents' home. They all recently moved to a new location after purchasing a new house. The house was big, but it was not new. 3 families have previously lived inside that house, and not one of those families was able to live longer than a year inside that house. Though no negative reviews were made about that house before Majid's father purchased it. After a month of moving furniture, Majid's finally able to sleep in his own bedroom. On the first night, a nightmare awakens Majid. He reads his prayers and he goes back to sleep. The next day, Majid is awakened from his sleep again, dreaming the exact same dream. He reads his prayers and he goes back to sleep. The same thing would happen every single night for 3 months. He gives up and he goes to tell his father about the nightmare situation. What is the dream? His father asks him. I see a 3-year-old child guiding me to the water tank behind the house. And when we both reach the water tank, we're both attacked by a big black dog. That's what I've been dreaming every single night, says Majid. And indeed, there is a huge water tank at the back of the house. And Majid never thought of checking it out. Majid and his father both read their prayers and they go to that tank. There's a big lid on the top of the tank that is shut tight. They open the lid and they see nothing inside but clear water. Majid notices a white bag sealed tight thrown all the way deep inside that tank. They manage to get it out and they find out this was black magic that was placed deep inside that tank for many years, harming a child. Inside the bag, they found human hair. The black dog in the dream represents a demonic presence near that water tank. After an Islamic procedure of undoing the black magic, the child that was potentially harmed should be free. And Majid never got the dream again after that day. Until now, he has no idea who that child was. And why did that child try to contact Majid specifically? And is this child dead or alive? This is a true horrifying story, part 19. This story happened in Kuwait in the year 2014. Faisal, a 22-year-old man that was a ventriloquist by hobby. Ventriloquists are professional entertainers that use dummies to speak without moving their lips. Faisal was always antisocial and had a strange personality ever since he was a child. He never had any friends growing up and he never performed ventriloquism on a stage before. Faisal only practiced alone in his room and he would put on a ventriloquism show for other dummies alone. He was lonely. No one ever appreciated the talent he had. This talent used to be a joke among Arabs. One day, he decided to add a special puppet to his collection, and he was in contact with an owner of an antique store in London for many months. A time came where he was able to fly to London and purchase that special dummy that the antique store owner valued so much. The antique dummy was named Toby. Faisal flew to London, met the owner of the store, and he was amazed the first time he saw the puppet Toby. It was like he found the ultimate piece that completed his collection. Faisal purchased the dummy, they packed it well, and they flew it to Kuwait. Ever since the first few days of Toby being inside Faisal's house, things were always just going wrong. Furniture would be out of place, things would go missing, and the piping system would just keep knocking at night. And Faisal's mom would always shout and scream, blaming this dummy Toby. She would scream and shout at Faisal for bringing this cursed toy into the house. "Take this thing out of my house," the mom would tell Faisal every single day. And Faisal always thought that his mom was overreacting. Until one day, Faisal found his 5-year-old brother in his bedroom drawing strange symbols on a piece of paper. "What are you drawing?" Faisal asks his younger brother. He responded back by saying, "Toby taught me how to draw," while the puppet Toby was just laying there in front of his younger brother. Just remember, a 5-year-old can barely write letters on paper rather than drawing demonic symbols. They found out a few days later through an Islamic sheikh that the younger brother was writing talasam. Talasam in Islam is known to be a black magic ritual that summons jinns. And Faisal decided that it was time to take Toby back to London. This is a true horrifying story, part 20. This story took place in Salalah, Oman in the year 2017. Oman is known to have a historic significance of black magic, and specifically in caves is where most black magicians used to do their rituals. But you should know that Oman is an Islamic country and it condemns black magic. Fatima, a 16-year-old girl from Muscat, planned a 10-hour road trip to Salalah with her family. They prepared food and drinks, got their camping tents ready, and prepared everything else before they head out. They finally reached to Salalah, and Fatma's father sets up camp and prepares the campfire. Fatima and her sister run off and explore the area. Fatma, shufi. Fatma's sister finds an old cave under a mountain, and they start exploring this cave. The cave was very cold and it smelled like there were dead animals in there. The deeper they go, the stronger the smell gets. Fatma notices talasim carved all over the cave walls. Fatma's sister suddenly stops, stares in front of her with her eyes wide open. They both see a person covered in black with its back facing the girls. This human-like being turns around and screams, "Get out!" Fatma drops her phone from fear and they both run for their lives. They tell their parents what happened and the father agreed to change the camp location. "But I forgot my phone in there," Fatma tells her dad. Fatma's father starts laughing and says, "Don't worry, I'm gonna go get it for you." They all see the father going back inside that same cave, fearing for his life. 1 hour goes by and the dad is still inside that cave. They tried calling him with other phones many times, but there aren't any signals inside caves. An hour and a half later, the dad finally comes out with no reaction whatsoever. He hops in the car without saying a word. Fatma kept asking if he's okay and if he found her phone. He slowly turns around, looks at the girls and says, "I told you girls to leave the cave, but both of you didn't listen." And they both looked at each other confused, but their veins froze when they realized that this wasn't their father that was speaking. The father suffered repetitive jinn possession attacks. Ever since that day, he stepped inside that cave. For 2 years until he passed away in the year 2019. Jinns are real. Possession of a jinn is real. Black magic is real. Don't mess around in caves because jinns can haunt you for eternity if they were disturbed. This is a true horrifying story, part 21. This story took place in Dubai in the year 2016. This story was published by Jules Beck a few months ago on Khalij Times. It was a regular school day, and I was 15 years old at the time. I was laying in bed, and I felt something creep up on me. I couldn't see what it was, as I sleep in pitch darkness. I thought it was just my legs going numb. But then I found out that it wasn't. Whatever this thing was, it was heavy. I can feel it walking up towards me, on my body. I also heard strange noises in my ears. Sounded like something was screaming. I turned to see if something was around me, but there was nothing there. I kept thinking this could have been a nightmare. My mom suddenly walks in, and she says, "It's okay, dear. You're probably having a nightmare. I'm gonna read you prayers, and everything will be fine." This creepy thing went away, and I fell asleep after my mom read her prayers. I woke up the next morning asking myself, wait a second, how did my mom even know I was having nightmares? So I went and asked her, and she looked at me confused. "What are you talking about? I was fast asleep at that time, and I did not walk into your room. This never happened before, and I still wonder till this day if I was alone that night." So that's Jules' story. I want to cover something myself. This is my theory behind this story. This 15-year-old child definitely had something that's known to be called yathum, scientifically known as sleep paralysis, but religiously known to be a demon that paralyzes you during your sleep. This is religiously known. If a house is filled with prayers and members of good deeds, good jinns usually protect the house from bad jinns. And the appearance of the mother walking in was definitely a good jinn, protecting that child from a bad entity. This is a true horrifying story, part 22. This story took place in Ras Al Khaimah, the United Arab Emirates, in the year 2021. Faisal Hashmi, a horror filmmaker hunting down haunted places in the country. He took a trip with many of his friends to Ghost Town, also known as Jazirat Al Hamra, knowing that everyone in the country knows that this place is infested with jinns. A little after midnight, they finally arrived to that abandoned town. Faisal immediately feels uneasy while driving inside that town. He felt like danger was lurking, waiting for him and his friends. They took pictures of the abandoned houses and mosques, and then finally they decided to leave. Days later, Faisal felt like that trip was not enough, so he decided to go again. And this was a decision he made that he cannot forget till this day. This time, however, he went with just 2 of his friends. On their way there, the vibe already started to feel mildly off. They reached their destination and they decided to go deep inside the town, areas tourists have never seen before. They drive down the untouched abandoned road and they park the car with the lights on next to a pillar. The pillar was visible. It was very smooth, but it was very old as well. They went inside one of the houses to take pictures and they felt unusual movements, unusual sounds, and a strange energy that wants them out immediately. These are real senses of a jinn being present and aware. They run out the house and they go back into the car. As they approach the pillar, the one next to the car, they noticed that this time it looked very different. There was a handprint on the pillar, and not just any handprint. It was a handprint that was pressed into the cement itself, just like it was a deep impression. All of them swore that this was not there when they hopped out of the car. The car was parked in a way where the handprint would have been the first thing they would have seen. This was indeed a real jinn experience that a horror filmmaker experienced himself. Jinns are real. Jinns can hurt you. The slap on that pillar was just a warning. Jinns do not like to be disturbed. A'udhu billah. This is a true horrifying story, part 23. Out of all stories, this one definitely gave me shivers. This story took place in Dubai, in a small town called Dubai Healthcare City, in the year 2015. To be specific, in building number 27, May, a 30-year-old from the Philippines. She's an employee working in a store in building 27. She started her job in that store hearing many rumors about this building from other employees in the same place saying how building 27 is haunted. She would keep hearing different stories from several people she met in the building, including the security guards. On the night shift, when all the stores and clinics are closed, there are no people in the building, and the guards have to go through paranormal experiences every single night. But by far, the scariest story she ever heard was the story about the little boy in the clinic. His name is John. Many staff have seen this little boy around and in the clinic. To non-Muslims, John is a spirit of a little boy. To Muslims, this is not a little boy. John is a shaitan. In other words, a jinn. Entities that are created by God that live in their own world. They're also known as demons. In Islam, when a person dies, the spirit of this person does not stay among us. Spirits are lifted up in the skies. Jinns live among us. On one of the nights in 2015, the energy in the building was off. Everyone in the building already got used to the paranormal events that they experience. But on that specific day, the building flared up. Something or someone upset the beings in this building. At the store, May and her colleague were hearing noises of someone pushing a shopping cart. They go and check, but there is no shopping cart, and there's no one there. The noise keeps coming back every minute after they go and check. May and her colleague are dying from fear. They decided to ignore the noise and act like nothing is happening. An hour later, they hear the guard yelling, "Stop, stop." May looks out and sees the guard chasing someone, but she can't see who it is. A few minutes later, the guard passes by the store and asks, "Did you see a little boy running? Or did you see a boy run past the store?" Her throat dried up as her skin started to feel colder. She was horrified, and she said no. But she knew exactly who the guard was looking for. Because as the guard was asking her the question, Jun was right there, staring at her, behind the guard. This is a true horrifying story, part 24. This story took place in Dubai on the 13th of April 2018. Amira, a middle-aged Muslim Filipino woman, spent 20 years of her life living and working in Dubai. Back in 2018, she lived alone in a residential building in Al Rigga. She had a decent job. She worked 5 days a week and had 2 days off. On one of her days off, the 13th of April, it was a Friday night. Amira and her girlfriends planned a hangout on that day. Around 4 p.m. on that day, Amira gets a call from her landlord, which rarely happens. He told her, "Hi Amira, as agreed, don't forget to let me know please." And she was confused. "Let you know about what?" He said, "The thing we spoke about an hour ago." She said, "But we never spoke an hour ago." He said, "I asked you if you wanted to extend your contract because I'm traveling in a few days and I need to process your papers. And you responded by saying, yes, I want to extend." She was so confused. She looked up all her texts, all her messages, but she never spoke to the landlord in a long time. She ignored the situation. She ended up coming back home around 10 p.m. on that same night. When she pulled up at her building, the guard of the building approached her running. "How are you down here? There's someone in your flat and I thought it was you," the guard said. Something very creepy is happening to Amira. Amira and the building guard both go upstairs to her flat, but there was no one there. So they go back to one of the control rooms in the building and they rewind the CCTV footage. And indeed, there is a person that cannot be seen, supposedly being Amira, entering her flat. Amira confirmed after she met with an imam and explained her story. People in the same neighborhood have told Amira that they saw her and said hi, and she ignored them. And this was even a bigger shock to her, because she was never at that location at that time when they said hi to her. There are two possible explanations to this. When Amira spoke to the landlord and ignored these people saying hi, Amira was not at her state of mind, meaning Amira was possessed at these specific times. But that still does not add up. Then who was the woman that entered her flat? Who was the person her neighbors were saying hi to, certain that that was Amira? And this is a logical explanation. Amira was cloned by a jinn many times in several locations. But why? Why did the jinn choose to take Amira's physical appearance walking around the neighborhood? And who was the person that spoke to the landlord and asked him to extend her stay? This is a true horrifying story, part 25. Warning, this is not a joke. The information that's going to be shared is dangerous and life-threatening. Do not, under any circumstance, commit the actions that will be narrated. This is the world's most dangerous book ever, Shams al-Ma'arif. This book was written by Ahmad al-Buni in the 17th century. But technically, the author of this book is not a human being. I never did and will never read this book. And this is your second warning. Do not read this book. Ahmad al-Buni practiced black magic, and he was in contact with the most powerful jinns and demons before he passed away. The jinns were the authors of this book. The elder generations, like our moms and dads, have heard about this book and they were warned by it. There are thousands of horrifying stories of people who read this book. Shams al-Ma'arif explains everything about black magic, how to get in touch with the world of jinns, how to marry a jinn, and the sacrifices you have to do for the devil, and much more. Unfortunately, this book can be easily found online. One day, a Saudi Arabian man that read hundreds of books for a living decided to read this book specifically out of interest and love for all books, without fearing the consequences behind it. He reached the chapter that teaches readers how to get married to a female jinn. He laughed about it. He tried the ritual to experiment it. The first night after finishing the whole book and completing the marriage ritual, he felt someone breathing next to his face. And on the second night, he felt a hand touching his feet. And on the third night, he heard her voice. The man was officially locked in a marriage with a demon 5 years go by. He met a normal, beautiful woman that he fell in love with, and they both decided to get married. A week before the wedding day, the bride, the bride's parents, and the groom's parents all pass and die in 3 different car crashes. These are the consequences behind this book. And it's also known from many stories of people that have died from reading the first few pages. If you don't finish reading the book, you will get killed. All my stories, all of them, are true incidents that happened one time only. But this book is a product that is permanently available online. I beg you, do not go anywhere near Shams al-Ma'arif. This video is to educate you on the dangers behind this book. Do not go anywhere close to the world of jinns.